before I get started, full disclosure, I work for Chocolatey, so I'm not here to give you a sales pitch, I promise. I'm just going to try and provide you with some information about what Chocolatey is. In order to do that, I am going to show you a couple of features of the paid-for products, the paid-for features within Chocolatey, but I will call them out so there's a clear distinction between what's available in the open source version and what's available in the paid-for version. What I will say is that first and foremost, Chocolatey is an open source project. It's always going to be free, so you're always going to be able to utilize it. Even in a commercial setting, you can use the open source version of Chocolatey within your organizations if you choose to. Okay, so with that part out of the way, if you are interested in the slides are available on that short link at the top there, and the second link is for the GitHub repo that hosts all of this. So if you need that, they're both there. So for what we need to answer first is what is Chocolatey? So before we go into that, I know there's at least one person in the room that uses Chocolatey. Who's using Chocolatey today? Some? Beautiful, good, okay. What is Chocolatey? Chocolatey is a global PowerShell execution engine using NuGet packaging infrastructure, the ultimate automation tool for Windows. So I don't personally think that goes far enough. What I like to think of Chocolatey is, and this is completely biased, it's complete magic, right? Once you start digging into it, it's phenomenal what you can achieve with it, okay? And we're going to dig into that in a little bit. Because when we start thinking about the Windows ecosystem today, as most of you will already know, when we're talking about Windows, we're talking about visual interfaces. So when you're installing something, you typically go and download the exe or the MSI, you double click on it, it'll pop up a box that says next to nothing on it, and you have to hit next, and then you have to hit next again, you have to finish. Okay, so it's very much driven by manual input on the end user. He has to do something, or he or she has to do something in order to make that installation happen. Okay, there's no place more evident of this user interface in Windows than when we start talking about the Windows installer ecosystem. Okay, so when we think of the Windows installer ecosystem, some of you might have come across this, but it's literally that case of, oh my god, there's so many differences in terms of how those things happen. There's over 20 different installer formats when we start talking about Windows. Are we talking about an exe? Are we talking about an MSI? Are we talking about self-extracting exe? Are we talking about a zip file that you have to download and put somewhere? All of these things build up into this mishmash of things. So when it comes to trying to automate those installations across your environment, it can be quite difficult and haphazard. And what you typically end up with are scripts all over the place that will provision this application in one way and another one it doesn't another way. There's little or no consistency. And simply put, some installers are just terrible, right? They won't lend themselves well to automation. They'll put files in random places. Again, there's no consistency about how that works. So when we think about it, it is literally like the Wild West, right? It's especially in an organization's context, when you're trying to get a handle on all of this stuff, it can be very difficult, okay? Now, before I go into this part, I just want to prefix it with the fact that I love paint.net, right? It's a great application, it does what it does very well, but it's sort of atypical of the kind of standard installation that you want to perform, okay? So let's imagine the scenario that we want to install paint.net. So obviously, you go to Google and you Google for paint.net, because that's what you do, right? That's how you find things on the internet today. So what that takes you to is the Warner Paint and Color Company, because paint.net, the URL, isn't owned by the application that is paint.net. You get to this website. So we're already off on the wrong foot because we haven't been able to find that installer. So if you go back to Google and look for the second search result, you'll find it at getpaint.net, okay? So then you get to the actual getpaint.net website and you find this. And then there's this nice big green button here that you might think is the one you want to click on, but it's actually not. That'll take you to an ad-driven website. Now, I totally understand why paint.net do this. This is them getting their revenue, but I feel there are better ways of getting that revenue other than sending your users, or potential users, off to a random website to download some random crapware from the internet. Okay? So if you then click on the correct link, which is the top one there, it'll take you to this one, where you have multiple download options. One of which is to get it from Windows 10 Store, and that's fine, you can get it from Windows 10 Store, or you can download it. So again, you can get to there, and eventually you'll find the website, but while it's downloading, you'll get some more ads. So while I was taking these screenshots, this was me buying my new standing desk for my new office. So obviously I wanted to look at that while I was downloading paint.net. Then when you actually get that zip file downloaded, you have to remember to unblock it, because all of the EXEs contained within that zip file can't be executed because they're inherently untrustworthy because they came from the internet. So you have to remember to first unblock that file before you can actually extract it, to then be able to do the install. And then when you get to this part and you've actually went through the click, 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 click next, you then get a warning saying you haven't met the dependencies that are required to install that application, because you need to have .NET Framework 4.7.1 installed on that machine. So you've gone through all that hardship and you've finally got something you want to install, and then you get told, well, you can't install it yet because you have to go off and do this thing. Okay? So, like I say, I'm not picking on paint.net, it's just kind of the best one to illustrate my point. But a lot of utility functions, a lot of utility programs have this exact same scenario, and you'll have been through it yourself. So the question is, there has to be a better way of doing this. So in my, again, completely biased way of saying it, there is a better way, and that better way is with Chocolatey. Okay? So Chocolatey would let you, well, that's not really coming through very well. Chocolatey lets you install paint.net with one simple command, and that's literally choco install paint.net. And if you run that command, and we'll run it later as part of our demo, it will handle all of those things for you. It will handle all those dependencies that we spoke about. So it will know, because the package maintainer that created that package has understood that there is a dependency on another application being installed, that application being .NET Framework 4.7.1. So it's actually described in the metadata for that package that it needs that dependent package in order to install this one. Okay, so Chocolatey takes care of all that sort of stuff. It takes care of going out to the right website and downloading the right installation package depending on your architecture, whether it's a 32-bit application you're installing or a 64-bit application. It's taking care of all of that ad-driven revenue that you had to walk through to download the exact file. Someone has already figured out what that is and put it into the Chocolatey package, ready for you to make use of it. Okay, so this is again one example, but on the Chocolatey community repository, there's over 6,000 packages that all have these things already done for you today. So you make use of them within your environment, within your architecture, and immediately start automating that process of doing all those installs. So what we like to say is that Chocolatey is sane software management. It easily manages the software lifecycle. So what we haven't spoken about yet is, well, what do you do once you upgrade it? So let's imagine the scenario that we've went to our computer and we've installed paint.net. We've walked up and we've said, Choco install paint.net. What happens the next week when an update for that application comes along? So that's where Chocolatey handles that complete software lifecycle management. It will actually allow you to then say, Choco upgrade paint.net. And again, it will reach out to the community repository or whatever sources you've got configured, and it will allow the upgrade of that package as well. It handles all things that I spoke about. It handles all those EXEs, those MSIs, those zips, those zip files, those binaries, all of those 20 different installer formats that you would ultimately have to script out or manually automate yourself. It has knowledge of all of those and can handle all of those. Because at the end of the day, a Chocolatey package, as we'll see, is just PowerShell. So it's driven by PowerShell and a PowerShell module that provides helper functions that make the installation of a package very, very easy. The packages are then independent building blocks. So as I said, in order to install paint.net, we had to install the .NET Framework 4.7.1. So you get this chain of package dependencies that are required in order for a single package to be installed you have that dependency chain, and each one of those are independent packages that you can manage by themselves. It also integrates with everything configuration management. So there's sometimes a slight bit of confusion in terms of what Chocolatey is, in terms of software applications like Puppet, like Chef, like Ansible. Those higher level configuration management systems all integrate with Chocolatey. So we like to say that Chocolatey does Chocolatey does its one main thing very, very well, which is the installation and updating of a software application. But it will integrate with the Chefs, the Puppets, the Ansibles to allow the orchestration of that across an environment. Okay, so it will integrate with all of those things. It will also integrate with things like SCCM. Okay, and it does have business-friendly features that aid in that complete software lifecycle management. So the way that we go about doing that is we have a single unifying interface. That Choco install, that Choco upgrade, all of those commands are the entry point for managing those packages. You don't have to care whether it's an exe or a self-extracting exe or a zip file or an MSI. It's Choco install package name. Okay. It's also completely decentralized. Chocolatey out of the box will come configured with a single source, as we call it, which is pointed at chocolatey.org. That's the community repository, the community package repository where those 6,000 packages live. But if, like most people, you don't trust the internet and you don't trust those packages, you can completely disconnect Chocolatey, the exe, from that community repository, and you can own all of those packages internally, even for yourself as an individual or as a company. It's completely flexible through the use of PowerShell. Anything you can do in PowerShell, you can do within a Chocolatey package. So whether it's talking about the larger life cycle where we have to control how a package works. So once you've actually got that software installed, you might need to open firewall ports or configure certificates. All of those things you can do in PowerShell, you can do through a Chocolatey package with PowerShell as well. It's secure out of the box. What I mean by that is, we'll come on to this slightly, but one of the first things, when you first install Chocolatey, if you do choco install paint.net, it actually won't do anything. They'll come up with a confirm prompt that says, do you actually want to install this? So it's not going to just run off and install lots of things on your computer. It will only do the things that you instruct it to. We take that to the nth degree, where you can actually print out the contents of the PowerShell script that it's going to execute. So if you're at all concerned about what that package is doing, you can look at that script and knowingly execute it based on having a review of it. And we like to say it's reliable. It's kind of self-explanatory. That's really talking about the repeatability, the reliability of the installation of the package. Once it's known to work, it's going to continue to work again and again and again across all of those machines that you're installing onto. So the community package repository that I spoke about, I kind of hinted at it. It's available at chocolatey.org/packages. It is a maintained package feed. Okay. Now, I'm going to get a limb here and say, community moderation and the maintenance of packages is probably the best thing about Chocolatey and probably one of the worst things about Chocolatey, right? And I'll explain that. It's great because from a community standpoint, there is security, again, that the packages have went through some sort of triaging and moderation process. So what I mean by that is, if Toby here decides he wants to create a Chocolatey package and he wants to put some malicious script into that package to do something nefarious, because let's face it, it's Toby, right? We, as the Chocolatey team, have mechanisms in place to prevent that from happening. So the first one is that, unlike NuGet.org, if you push a package to NuGet.org, okay, let me rephrase that, because it's changed slightly a little bit. Previously, with NuGet.org, if you pushed a package, it would just immediately become published without any sort of sense checking on it. That's changed slightly, and they now at least do some sanity checking in terms of virus checking, similar now to what Chocolatey.org does. But in the past, it would just immediately appear. When you push a package to Chocolatey.org, it doesn't immediately appear. It goes through 3 or 4 automation processes. The first one is that we run what we call the package verifier. And the package verifier is literally looking at the contents of the scripts to make sure that they are well formed, that there's no immediately nefarious things going on. We do that as package verifier, package validator, sorry. Package verifier then actually installs the package. We spin up a VM in the cloud, we run the install, make sure that it succeeds, and then at that point, that package is then up for human moderation. So a human moderator has to come along and moderate that package, and that's where it's the worst thing for moderators, because there's literally a shit ton of packages, right? And each one of those has to be moderated by a human. So when we first turned it on in 2014, there was something like 5,000 packages sitting in the queue that needed to be moderated. So there is a team of moderators out there. It's not necessarily as big a team as we would like. If anybody wants to put the hand up and become a community moderator, feel free to reach out, because we want some. But we've now got that queue down, so what you can expect now is that if Toby does push a package and it's not nefarious, it's not malicious, and it goes through all of those automated processes, and a human moderator comes along, then we like to say within a day or 2 days, at the very most, that package will then be available on the feed. Okay. The other one is that everything goes through VirusTotal. So I'm right in saying that we're now one of the biggest contributors to VirusTotal in terms of EXEs and binaries that go up for virus testing. So every time we push a package, we will extract the contents of that package, find out all the EXEs, MSIs, as files that are contained within that package or touching that package, and we'll submit them to VirusTotal. And they'll run through 60 to 70 virus engines, and it'll report back to say whether they are there's anything bad in those packages, and we'll actually halt a moderation if there are we typically cut it off at 4. If there are 4 detections, then we will stop that package going through, because there is an element of false positives sometimes with submissions to VirusTotal, so we hold at 4, and that's where we stop at. And the other part of that is that, and this kind of goes back to the security aspect and not trusting the internet, what we do say about the community package repository is that you shouldn't trust it. If you're an organization, you shouldn't be using the chocolatey.org repository directly. You should be in your own processes, your own systems, you should be independently validating those packages to make sure that they are doing what you want them to do and not what someone else wants them to do. Okay, so we don't recommend that organizations use that. At the tail end of last year, we actually made it a little bit harder for organizations to use the community repository, because we actually implemented rate limiting. So chocolatey.org literally gets millions of requests every day, and we found that unfortunately a reasonably small percentage were using the most bandwidth, because they were using chocolatey.org for provisioning lots of applications across lots of systems, and other people were then having the side effect was that chocolatey.org wasn't as stable for everyone else. Okay, so what we've implemented is a system of rate limiting. So if you attempt to install Chocolatey now 5 times within a minute, you will get rate limited. You'll get a 429 response back from the request, and you'll be essentially locked out for an hour. So that's for chocolatey.org, Chocolatey package itself. If you attempt to install any other package more than 20 times within a minute, then you'll be subject to the same rate limiting. So this is not an attempt by us to push people towards business features or anything like that. This is literally us trying to protect chocolatey.org so that everyone is able to use it all the time. Okay. If you are running into that, the recommendation would be to host those packages on your own internal feed, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. So as of about an hour ago, when I took this screenshot, there are 6,428 unique packages on chocolatey.org, and they've been downloaded 440 million times across the lifetime of chocolatey.org. And the third number there is the number of known good packages. Now, what that is, it's about 2/3. It's not too bad. I mentioned package verifier as a moderation system for testing that the package actually installs correctly. Package verifier also runs on submitted packages, and it'll do that every month. So it'll continue to test those packages to ensure that the latest version is still working and working correctly. So that second number, the 4,466, is of those 6,000 packages, these are ones that are known to currently be working correctly. Now it's a rough estimate because there are idiosyncrasies in there, and we can talk about that if you want to, but that's the metric for as of today. But what we do say is that that's literally just the beginning. Those 6,000 packages that are on chocolatey.org are just the tip of the iceberg. We have many people using Chocolatey in-house, and literally thousands of other packages are maintained internally within those environments out with chocolatey.org. So Chocolatey is not just chocolatey.org, but like I say, out of the box, it does use it. So if you were interested in hosting your own packages, there's full documentation on the website, as well as a couple of links there to how you would want to use systems like Artifactory or Nexus to create your own hosting environment for those packages. So you can do that. You can actually download them from chocolatey.org, immediately put them into your own Artifactory or Nexus system, and then install them from there. So you cut out the middleman, you cut out chocolatey.org, and you use them internally. There are other systems if you prefer. Artifactory is paid for. You have to, as a commercial license, Artifactory, you have to pay for them. Nexus has a free version you can use for free. I'm not a lawyer though, so I can't say whether it can be used in a commercial setting, but that's up for your department to figure out. Other things you can use for internal hosting are some open source versions of NuGet Gallery and the Chocolatey server. They are limited in features when you compare them to Artifactory and Nexus, but they will get you started. So, kind of going back full circle a little bit, we'll talk about specifically what is a Chocolatey package. What's the makeup of a Chocolatey package? When I talk about a Chocolatey package, I'm talking about a nutkeg or a new package file, an NUPKG file. So it's essentially a fancy zip file that just contains all of the information, all the metadata that is required to get an application installed on your machine. It contains things like the version number, links off to where it can be downloaded, links to support pages, all that sort of stuff that you would want for any particular package. Inside that package, you'll typically find two files. One is a chocolatey install.ps1 file, and one is a chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file. So those are the instruction scripts on how to do the actual installation and the uninstallation. And with that, we've got 30 or so built-in functions that make that really simple. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's very little to the actual contents of a Chocolatey package when you actually break it down. What we've started finding more and more, though, is package maintainers. So all the packages on chocolatey.org are maintained by a suite of volunteers. It's not maintained, but they're not maintained by us. They're maintained by community maintainers. What we're starting to find is more and more package maintainers are actually taking the EXE or the MSI and putting it inside the Chocolatey package itself. So rather than a Chocolatey package having to first run off to the internet to do a download, the actual installer is already embedded within the nutkeg. So it's already there. It's the most reliable way of doing that installation because the installer is already there. We have limitations on chocolatey.org in terms of redistribution rights, so we can't necessarily allow the hosting of an EXE or an MSI if the license doesn't preclude that. So as an example of that, we wouldn't host an embedded package for Visual Studio because we're not allowed to redistribute the Visual Studio installer. But some open source projects have a very open license that does allow the redistribution of the binaries, so we're able to do that. Okay. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour. Because I want to get onto the demos to kind of show you some of these. I think it's best illustrated in terms of demos. So again, that's the links to the slides and the code if anybody wants them. But before I get into demos, are there any questions before I jump into it? I'll take a couple of questions if there are any. Otherwise, we'll just plow on. Okay, no questions, so we'll plow on. So just to explain what I've got here, this is a Vagrant box that I've spun up just for illustration purposes. There's no real smoke and mirrors going on here. This is literally just a fresh install of Windows Server 2012 R2, and I've installed Chocolatey on it, and I've also put the business edition on it just because, like I say, I'm going to Some of the demonstrations are just easier to show with some of the business features, so I'll show you them. So I've got the business edition here, okay? So I spoke about the packaging. So the packaging is made up of that Chocolatey install.ps1 and Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file, typically. So the way that you would create a package is that you would use the choconew command. So let's just go into a directory, make directory, ctemp, and I'm going to cd into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the choconew command that will, if I can type it, choconew test package. So that's going to create me the scaffolding for a new package. And that scaffolding is going to have everything that's required to create that package. Okay? So if I just cd into that, and I want to run Visual Studio Code, because Visual Studio Code is my default text editor nowadays, so I want to use code to open that files, right? Now, that's failed, right? And it's failed because I don't have Visual Studio Code installed on this machine. And I like to illustrate this because this is kind of where Chocolatey started. So the Chocolatey founder, who is Rob Reynolds, the reason he started Chocolatey is because he would start a pairing session with someone in his team, and he would walk over to their machine and he would want to use applications that he was familiar with. He would want to use applications that he knew how to use and knew how to do the thing that he was trying to achieve. So he got frustrated when he would walk up to a machine and it didn't have those kind of atypical applications installed ready to be used. So what he wanted to do is to have a system that he could just walk up to, and if it didn't have something, he could just install it. So if I walk up to this machine that didn't have VS Code installed, and I just run choco install VS Code, then it's going to run off to the internet, and it's going to run off to chocolatey.org, and it's going to download all of the packages that are required to do that installation. So in this example, it's run off and it's said that the Chocolatey code extension is required in order to perform the installation. That extension package is used. And the other thing that it's doing is that once it's actually started the download of VS Code, you'll see here that it's using a Cdn cache. So just to explain that a little bit, so I kind of hinted at it. So if we look inside the Visual Studio Code package, what we'll find is that all it's doing is telling the Chocolatey to run off to that a URL to download the installer for VS Code, right? Now, companies have a habit of changing those URLs from time to time. They'll change the URL, the download URL, so that you can no longer download it from that location. And when that happens, inherently, that Chocolatey package is then broken because the URL is different and it can't be changed. So we have this mechanism of a Cdn cache for paid for users, and that's why I'm going to point it out, is that when someone submits a package to chocolatey.org, we'll actually take that installer and we'll host that on our CDN. Now we can get around that because then it's that's our customer CDN. It's not open to everyone, so we're not violating anything, and we can remove those if a company were to not want us to do that. But the benefit there is then that URL will always be available, so that Chocolatey package will always work. Okay, so it's taking a while to download because it's coming off of my phone. It's here, and I didn't know what the Wi-Fi was. So eventually it's going to download that exe and it's going to install it. And then we're going to be able to use Visual Studio Code to look at the contents of that choconew package. So now again, we can run code dot, and it's also going to fail. And this is another frustration that kind of comes into Windows as a platform. So what the Visual Studio Code installer did was it modified the path variable to include a location that code.exe or that code exe lives. So within this PowerShell session, I can't access that because that path variable is then not up to date. It updated it out with this PowerShell session. So I could just close and open that session again, or I could use one of the helper methods that come with Chocolatey, which is just refresh env. So what we're doing with that one is we're essentially rehydrating the path variable into the current PowerShell session. So if I just run code dot again, then we can finally run code, Visual Studio Code, and we can look at those files. So obviously the first installation of Visual Studio Code means that you have to go off and read the Getting Started guide. So I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to change this to be a light theme so that we can see it a bit better, and then we're going to zoom in a little bit so that everybody can see what we're talking about. Right. So now we can look at these files. So by default, Chocolatey created all these files for us, and there is literally lots and lots and lots of information on here to read for what you want to do with this package. So I would encourage you to read this. If you are creating a new Chocolatey package, all the information that you need to create that package are in these files. Okay? So when we come to talk about package moderation and package submissions, if you haven't done something that's explicitly stated in here, that package is going to get pushed back and you're not going to be able to get that package through moderation. Okay? So I would encourage you to read through this. There is a lot. Once you've done it the first time, you obviously don't need to do it again. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of these things because I kind of know what I want to do. And I'm going to close that one. And let's say that. I'm not going to talk about the before modify today. That's something for something different. If we look at the chocolatey install.ps1 file, you'll then see that there are a lot of information in here, because this template is trying to instruct you on how you want to create a package. Are you creating a package that installs a zip file and extracts it? Are you installing an MSI? Are you installing an exe? So there are templates in here that walk you through all of those things. So for now, I'm going to say we're not going to do any of that because we're not. So we're just going to do a very basic package that all it's going to do is say write host hello Sheffield, and I'm not going to type it right. Okay, save that and close that, and then the only thing I need to do is provide a version number in this new spec file. So the new spec file is the description, the metadata of the package. It's the title, the version number, all of the download URLs, all of the help URLs, documentation URLs, all live in this new spec file. So I just need to give it a version number. So having done those things, and then let's just actually take rid of this one as well. We're only going to have the one file that's actually in there. What I need to do now is I need to create a nutcake. So all we've got just now are random files in the file system that actually don't do anything. We need to provide a nutcake that Chocolatey can use to do the installation. So the way that we could do that is we could go back to our PowerShell window and we could run the command which is chocopack, and that would take that new spec file, generate a nutcake which would then be installed. Okay, I'm not going to do that because what I want to illustrate to you is that there's a slightly easier way for doing that. So if we walk up to the community or the extension marketplace, we'll see that there's a Chocolatey extension for Visual Studio Code. So if we go ahead and get that installed, what that will give us, so we're in Visual Studio Code anyway, we're doing the editing in there, so rather than stepping away from Visual Studio Code, why not just do it within that same workflow? So we'll go ahead and reload this. So if we close this out, and then what we can do is we can walk up to command palette, and there's now 5 Chocolatey commands that you can use for helping build and maintain that package that you're using here. So we've already run the choconew, which was doing the scaffolding for that package. The other one that we've got in here is the pack. So we can run the pack command, and what it will do, it says, is it will look in the current workspace and it'll find all of the available new specs that are in the current workspace, and it'll allow you to pick one for the purpose of packing. So if I just pick the first one, it'll then provide us with a prompt for some additional arguments. So if you wanted to provide additional arguments to the pack command in terms of exactly how you wanted that Chocolatey package to be packed, then this is your opportunity to pass those in. We're not going to do that, but what we should get from our output now is a nutcake. He says, yes. So we've now got a nutcake here. So what we've got down here via the zip explorer, we can then look in the contents of that file that just got created, just to illustrate the fact that it is just a fancy zip file. So if we expand that and look at tools, we'll see that that's the Chocolatey install.ps1 file. So it's just a fancy zip file that's got a ton of other information in there in terms of exactly what the underlying NuGet framework did to make that package. You don't really need to worry about those, but the Zip Explorer here is just to help you ensure that all the files that you expected to be within that nupkeg actually got into there. Okay, so we can see there that that's the Chocolatey installer PS1 file, and that got dumped into there. So if I go back to here and then attempt to do an install of that package, so we can do choco install, which is called test package, and I haven't pushed that to chocolatey.org, so I need to provide an additional argument, which is where I can find that nupkeg on the file system. And that didn't do what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Choco install ctemp, and then test package. If I run that command, it'll find that nupkeg at that location, and then it'll do the installation. So the installation in this case was literally just to write out hello Sheffield, but it could be anything you want. So you could be using those helper methods that Chocolatey provides, or it can be doing literally anything you want. So an example of a type of package that you might want to use, if I go over here and open this, an example of a package that I do for my own sanity, if I go over here and have a look down here, then I have a package which is just called get13 git config. So this is a Chocolatey package that I can run on any machine, and it has all of my preferred Git configuration. So it's not actually installing anything, but all it's doing is setting up the way that I run Git. So it's setting up my merge tools, my diff tools, my code signing GPG keys, all of that sort of stuff is in this Chocolatey package. So I use that all the time. I walk up to a new machine that is my machine, I would install this package because it's just PowerShell. So all I'm doing is executing PowerShell commands. Okay. So the next example that I wanted to show, kind of to illustrate the points here, is let's imagine a scenario where we want to install an application, but that scenario where, no, that's a lie. I wanted to show you the paint.net. So right now on this machine, all I've got is paint. Okay, so that's the bog standard paint that comes with Visual Studio, comes with Windows. If I walk up to Chocolatey and say choco install paint.net, so again, it's going to reach out to chocolatey.org, it's going to download that paint.net application, that paint.net nupkeg. It's going to find out where it needs to download paint.net from, it's going to extract it, and it's going to install it. So rather than having to go through that, go to that website, do the download, unblock the zip file, go next, all of those things are taken care of for me. I don't have to do that. Okay, so hopefully that won't not going to take too long, and we'll see that happening. So again, it's finding all of those dependencies that are needed. So I said it wasn't smoke and mirrors. I cheated a little bit prior to this demo. So I already installed .NET Framework 4.7.1 on this machine, okay? Just because there's no point in you sitting here watching me install paint.net, installing the .NET Framework. So that part's already done. What you'll see here is that almost all Chocolatey packages need to be silent in order for them to pass moderation. Because what's the point in automating a package installation if you still need to click next on the installer? So the paint.net installer is silent, with the exception it does still show some UI. Okay, so it is still working, it is still doing its thing, but I mentioned earlier that some installers are just really, really bad, and there's no way of passing silent arguments into them to allow that process to be automated. So what you'll find is that some package maintainers actually use a system of auto hotkey. So they'll actually provide an auto hotkey script that clicks the right buttons on that installer to make it work. Now obviously that's reasonably fragile, but it's a mechanism in the open source version that would allow you to still automate those kind of behaving badly installers. Okay, so I'll leave that installing and we'll jump to the next one. So the next one is a scenario where we've probably all been in this scenario. We've installed something, and then almost straight away a CVE was detected on that application, and we need to install the new version. Okay, so what I'm going to try and show is a way of creating and maintaining those packages in a way that will allow you to deal with those scenarios. So if we go into here, so I've got a couple of examples here. So I've got two EXEs. So the scenario that I'm trying to show here is that let's imagine that we've installed, or we're going to install, a specific version of 1Password, and then we want to get the next version of 1Password installed on our machine. So what we could do is, if we're using Chocolatey open source, we could go through that process. We could go through Choco New, we could find all the correct arguments to pass in to that installer to make it silent, and we could walk through that process, or we could use the one from chocolatey.org. But what the business version gives you is this option of creating a Chocolatey package from an EXE or from an MSI directly. So it's just a right-click option, and you can say, create Chocolatey package with IP. So what it will do is it will actually go into that installer and find out what type of installer it is, and it will figure out that password. I will fold it there. Oh, sorry. I'm going to delete the one that I prepared earlier. I'm going to delete that one. Yes. Let's just control here that. So I'm going to right click on this one with no GUI, and it's going to inspect that EXE, and it's going to find out, is it an InnoSetup EXE, is it an install shield, and it will create the packaging for me on the fly. So if I look at this, and I go CD into C, Vagrant, Resources, and then Installers, and then 1Password, and then code into that again. So what it's done for us automatically is it's already created that chocolatey install.ps1 file for us. So it's already using all the best practices of what Chocolatey is and how it works, and it's figured out that the best way of creating that package is to embed it. So it's already embedded the EXE into the Chocolatey package here. It's then passed in all of these silent arguments based on knowing that it's, in this case, it's an InnoSetup.exe, so it already knows all the command line arguments that need to be passed in to make it work and make it a silent install. And then what it's done is it's then created this nutkeg for us straight away. Okay, so the 5 seconds that it took there to right click on that EXE and generate that nutkeg is kind of where the business features start to come into it. So rather than doing all of that work manually, this is where we like to think there's some value add from those ones. So if we go back to our PowerShell window, and we will just, let's go ahead and install that now. So let's do choco install 1Password. Choco install 1Password. It's got a 6 on the end. So again, I'm going to specify the source as just the current folder. So it's going to run off and it's going to install 1Password. So if we go over here and do add remove programs, we should see that we've now got 1Password installed. So it's spun up 1Password as part of the installation, and then the end result is we've now got 1Password installed. Okay? But then the scenario is that we want to upgrade that on all of our machines. So again, we want a new version. We want to push out that new version. So if we go ahead now and run the same thing again, but let's just use the UI version of that this time. So what I showed you before was it being run from the command line. That's the way to automate the process as part of your internal infrastructure. But if you're happy if you're happier in the UI world, again, Windows is driven by UI and everything that kind of first and foremost. So you can do it through here as well. So this again is just taking, this has the ability to override specific versions, all of that new spec metadata. If you need to override it as part of the creation of this package, you definitely can do that. But the only thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to slightly change the output path so that it doesn't go into the same location. So let's go into, so that should be fine actually. So let's generate that. So under the hood it's doing the exact same thing, but we're doing it for the new version. I must have one there. No, it didn't do what I wanted to do, so let's close that. So let's change that to be Bob and generate that. So that completed, and then if we go into installers, we've now got a new folder Bob that has the new version of the nutcase in it. So if we drill down into that folder, and then run that same command again, but rather than do an install this time around, we're going to do an upgrade. So I spoke before about how you do an upgrade as opposed to an install. So this time round we're going to do that upgrade. So Chocolatey is going to know what version we have installed and what version we can go to. So if we let that run and then we update our add remove programs, then we should find that that version number now has that updated version. So again, it's kind of hoping to show the power of Chocolatey in terms of maintaining those application package versions across your environments, whether it's your own environment or whether it's the environments within your organization. Okay. The next demo that I wanted to show was upgrading and then using Chocolatey Sync. Okay, so the other part of Chocolatey that a lot of people like is the automation reports or the audit reports that can come out of it. So once we start installing packages through Chocolatey, we can then run commands such as chocolatlist local only. The chocolatlist local only will tell us all the packages that we have installed on any given machine and what package version that they're at. Okay, so in this scenario, I've got a few packages. We've got that one password one that we installed. We've got the one for paint.net and the test package that we installed. So what I want to do is, let's imagine again a scenario where we go back to add remove programs and you've got some enterprising person in your environment who decides that we've just gone to the hardship of installing one password and getting it upgraded to the last version using Chocolatey, and they decide that actually that's not what they want and they want to manually uninstall it. So at this point there's now a disconnect between what Chocolatey thinks is installed and what's actually installed on the underlying environment. Okay. Now in the open source version of Chocolatey, that would essentially be broken. I don't want to, that's a strong word, but essentially Chocolatey would think that something's installed, but it's actually not. Okay. Again, in the business version of Chocolatey, if I run that chocolatlist local only again, it's going to run the chocolate sync command, and it's going to know that something has been installed out from under the hood of it. It thought that the one password application was installed, but it's actually been removed manually by some other process. So Chocolatey will then update its license, update its package folder information to then know that one password is no longer installed on that machine. Okay, so again, it's that trial by 1,000 cuts. It's one less thing you have to worry about. But Chocolatey will maintain an accurate list of what's installed and compare it to what's actually installed. And the last one I wanted to show before we'll jump back to the slides is if we go to here and run chocolatlist local I, it's actually then going to show what's installed by Chocolatey. So we've currently got 12 packages installed by Chocolatey, but we've also got 5 applications that aren't installed by Chocolatey. They were installed either manually or by some other mechanism. So we can walk up with Chocolatey in the business version and run the choco sync command. So what it's going to do is it's going to look into add remove programs, and it's on the fly, it's going to create packaging for all of those applications. So it's going to look into there and it's going to see that it had 7-zip and Bitwise SSH and Git, all of those things. It's going on the fly, it's going to create packaging for those. So what it's done, if we go into the Chocolatey folder and look in C program data Chocolatey and then lib, then in here, let's use the bitwise one as an example, on the fly, it's essentially run that package builder that I showed you before. It generated, taken the information from add remove programs, it created the packaging on the fly, such that now when I run chocolate local only, all of those packages are now under the realm of Chocolatey. So when a packaged version is then released for an update, Chocolatey is then able to own that installation and update it as and when required. Okay, so that was the last demo that I had. What I wanted to go on to was just to illustrate that that's what I've shown today is really just the tip of the iceberg. The one that a lot of people make a use of, and I've seen a lot of people tweeting about this recently, is the choco upgrade all command. So once you've got a suite of applications installed with Chocolatey on your machine, your own individual developer environment or across your environment, you can run choco upgrade all, and it will run through all of those packages and install or upgrade all of the versions that are available for it. Okay. People are telling us that it's literally saving them hours of effort because they're not having to run off and download all those independently. They can run one command and then all of those packages are up to date. Other ones of noteworthy ones, central management UI is the thing I'm currently working on in Chocolatey. It is again, it's a business feature, but I want to mention it because it's been my baby for the last 8 months or so please bear with me. So I mentioned those Choco list local only, or the Choco outdated reports that you can get for information on one machine. Central management is really about taking all of that information across all of the machines in your environment and put it into one place. So we're providing a website that will take all of those report data from each of those individual nodes on your machine and bring it into one machine, so you've got reconciling across all of your environment about what's installed on all of the machines. Package reducer is an interesting one. Package reducer is, some of you'll know, when you're installing an MSI, that MSI will then potentially live in like 3 or 4 different places. So you've downloaded that MSI and you put it into your downloads folder. You've installed it and Windows has put it over here in a temporary cache because it needs to, and then it's also put it somewhere else. So Windows has got a habit of bloating quite a bit when you run through lots of multiple installs. Chocolatey will handle that, and it will actually remove all of those cached installations that you don't actually need anymore. So it'll do that. The download Cdn Cache I already mentioned. But again, there's lots of features in Chocolatey that there's just not enough time to talk to you all about today. So in closing, that's who I am. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out. Like I say, I do work for Chocolatey, but I was a contributor to the open source project for 7 or so years before Rob turned around and said, do you want to work for us? So I fully advocate the product, obviously, but I have been using it personally. I continue to use it personally on all my machines. Feel free to reach out if you have got any questions. And on that, are there any questions? John?
What about integration with Windows App Store? Do you have any plans?
Windows App Store integration. Yes, if Microsoft provide us an API that makes it work properly, then sure. Literally, we're constrained at the minute by the API structure. The API surface isn't there for us to do it. So essentially, what that will be once we get it is in the same way that we've got. So there's an install Chocolatey package helper method, as you'll probably know. There's an install Chocolatey package helper. I'm sorry again. There is an install Chocolatey package helper method that takes as an input, as one of the parameters is, are you installing an MSI or are you installing an exe? It will be in addition to that, there will be an Apex file. So if it's an Apex file, it will then be allow you to do that. The problem we have just now is that all of the Apexes that you would get from the Windows Store, there's no well-known URLs for them. You can't download them. And if you do have them, then you have to sideload them, and all sorts of good stuff. The API structure is just not there for us at the minute. In the same way that the new packaging format that is MSIX, there is a console application that helps with the installation of MSIXs, so that will be something that will come in due course. But at the minute, we're constrained by what the API surface in the Windows Store itself is. If you are, let me just show you this one quickly, in case you haven't seen it. Let's go here, let's go here. Microsoft scripts. Dev setup scripts. So this is a repository from Microsoft themselves. So at Build 2018, kind of Microsoft officially recognized Chocolatey for the first time ever, and said that we're great, which is good. So what they've got here is an example repository that shows how you can go from nothing to a fully installed and configured system. So the examples that they've got here are you doing machine learning? Are you doing app desktop development? Are you doing web development? So they've got a pre-canned installation script that uses Chocolatey and Boxstarter that brings your machine up from 0 to nothing. Now the reason I bring that up is that the way that they're actually doing the installation of the Windows subsystem for Linux is to directly call the add Apex package. So the way that that works is because they've then provided a well-known download URL for that one particular package that's available in the Windows Store. We don't know what all those URLs are for all of the other applications that are in the Windows Store, so we can't provide a wrapper around it. If and when we get that, we would provide a helper method that again provides one entry point for installing an Apex in the same way they do for an MSI and an EXE. So we would love to, but we can't, is the short answer. Okay? Any other questions? No?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's say I wanted to copy you and use the configure my git or Windows or Visual Studio Code or something.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an inbuilt feature to roll back what I've changed? Or do I have to do that manually, like returning the features, the configuration?
So, if I understood you correctly, so we did a command that was choco install VS Code. If we then do...
Yeah, not just installing it, but configuring it in the way that I'm personally used to. I think you showed an example.
With Git, yes.
Yeah.
So, so Chocolatey is reasonably clever in that it will... I'm running VS Code, that's why it's going to bail. Let's close that out. That's not a good idea. That was off script, so we should never do demos off script. Let's do that again. So if I answer you correctly, so you've got a configuration package that will set up VS Code in the way that you want it to be set up. So what you would do inside that package in the uninstall script is that you would have responsibility for undoing those things, right? Now, Chocolatey out of the box, let's go over here a second. So Chocolatey, bin, no not bin, Chocolatey, and then let's use VS Code as an example. Then Chocolatey, during the installation process, actually took a snapshot of essentially the file system and the registry before that installation occurred. Okay, so Chocolatey does have some knowledge of what happened at the system level. So for rolling back, it can then undo the things that it knows was done as part of that installation. For what you've described, which would be essentially running Git directly, Chocolatey is not going to know about those things. But you, as part of your package, could then have it in the uninstall script to undo that work. So the onus would be in you in that scenario to handle that, not Chocolatey itself. But the reason I bring that up is if we go to, so we'll see there that VS Code did get uninstalled, but if we run over here and go to chocolatey.org and look for VS Code, then we'll find that in this section here, hopefully you can see that, let's go in a bit, then there is no Chocolatey uninstall script for VS Code. So the reason that we can do that, or the reason that maintainer was allowed to submit that package, is because Chocolatey automatically uninstalled it based on that snapshot of information that it got as part of the installation. So it knew what was installed on the file system, so it can uninstall it automatically. So not all Chocolatey packages need an uninstall script, but for what you were describing, you probably would. Yes. Question?
So how does Chocolatey and Boxstarter work together?
How does Chocolatey and Boxstarter? Okay, so the question is, how does Chocolatey and Boxstarter work together? So, for those of you that don't, let's just have a quick foray into that one. So Boxstarter is another open source project that was created by an individual, a very clever individual called Matt Rocks. So what Matt created was a bolt-on to Chocolatey. So the open source version of Chocolatey kind of starts and stops with the installation of a package. Okay. Now, as most of you will know, when you're installing an application, it might need a reboot because it needs a reboot, right? So if you attempt to install a Chocolatey package and then install another one, if that one needed a reboot, then this one will probably fail, because Chocolatey out of the box is not going to handle that reboot requirement, because Chocolatey is a package manager, not a system manager out of the box. So Boxstarter actually bolts onto that, and it will, when it's through Boxstarter you can install one or more packages, and then it will detect whether or not a reboot is required. So Boxstarter will then automatically reboot the machine, log it back in, and then continue the installation process. So in the installation scripts that I showed you over here, what they're doing, and I'm not going to do this because I'm on a Mac, so it will fail horribly, but if I were to click one of those links, it would actually automatically install Boxstarter, install Chocolatey, and then provision, I want to say like 20 or 30 packages. And some of those are going to need reboots. So Boxstarter then steps in, identifies that a package required a reboot. It will then reboot the machine, automatically log back into the machine, and then continue the installation process. So long story short, magic. Boxstarter is now owned by the Chocolatey organization. Matt Rocks has stepped away from it, so we as the Chocolatey organization on GitHub now own that repository, and we are updating it. One of the things that Matt ran into when he was working on Boxstarter is that under the hood, Boxstarter is a click once application, so in order for it to be usable, it had to be code signed. That meant money out of Matt's pocket to continue the purchase of that certificate. We as Chocolatey already have that code signing certificate, so we now take that burden of that cost to continue to use, to continue to allow Boxstarter to be used for free. It's all open source. And yeah, magic is the answer. Okay. Any other questions? My voice is going, but yeah, question.
Yeah, I've tried and struggled in the past to get Chocolatey and Boxstarter script set up to pay the new dev machine with all the licensed software, so Visual Studio, SQL Server, all that kind of stuff. And at the time I found a lot of the resources were more to do with like open source software or little utilities and things. Are there any good resources that you recommend for getting moving with the sort of licensed big products like that that are quite common and popular?
So the question is, so to summarize, what do we do when we have monster installations like Visual Studio, like SQL Server, that require licenses, that require multiple things to happen as part of that installation? So the first part of that question is, if we go back over to chocolatey.org and we search for Visual Studio, then you will find packages for, there's lots in there. Which one am I looking for? Visual Studio build. There we go. So there, that is a package that will install Visual Studio 2017 Enterprise Edition. Okay, this is maintained by quite simply an amazing community maintainer called Jacob. He has all of the packages that are around Visual Studio build tools, all that sort of stuff. Jacob has a package on the community feed that will allow you to do that. Okay. However, we don't necessarily recommend using that in an organizational structure. So what this is a recipe repository that kind of shows you how you would do those monster installers in an enterprise-friendly way. So typically what this one is doing, I think if I remember correctly, is that this one assumes that you've already got a layout ISO downloaded from the internet that has all the workloads that you want installed on it, and then it will mount that ISO as part of the installation and then allow you to pre-configure it with all the licenses and things that you need in order to provision on the machines. So there is a repository that we're referring to as the Chocolatey package recipes that kind of helps or kind of guides people down how to do those monster installers as part of your environment. Short answer is look to see what the community feed is doing and how it's doing it, and then take that internally in a way that you're happy with. Because there are installers for SQL Server, Visual Studio, Office on the community feed, but again, in an organizational structure, you wouldn't want to use them, because that means downloading 8 gigabytes of an ISO onto each machine. You wouldn't want to do that, but you could take how it's doing it, internalize it, and then make it available in your organization in a repeatable way. Yeah. Short answer is there's no easy way of doing it. I'm going to start sounding like a salesperson if I talk about that, but I'll mention it anyway. As part of the business versions, there is a packaging service that you can use. So if you run into an installer that you just can't automate, then we offer a service which is to package that for you in a way that will work. So it's a fixed fee that you can pay, and then at the end of that you get an upkeg that will install. So I'm not in charge of that. I don't do it, but I know that we offer that as part of our service, because we've run into almost all of the bad installers out there, so we kind of know how to work with most of them. So that would be an option as well if you want to go down that path. Sales pitch over, promise. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll stop talking. No? Okay, thank you very much.